Evening, everyone. I am Nicole Shepherd, and I'm the Transitioning Youth Coordinator for the Southern Maryland region for the Developmental Disabilities Administration, otherwise known as DDA. So tonight I'm going to give you guys like a brief overview of DDA, our application process, what we do, and the services that we offer. And then I know Mr. Callahan is going to give you a very good presentation just based off on what providers are looking for and how the provider aspect comes into play. So after we've done our presentations, you can ask questions, but while we're doing our presentations, if you want to put questions in the chat, that's fine. And then we will address those questions once the presentations are done. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen so we can get started. Okay, let's go here and okay, and hopefully everyone can see that. Dorley, I can see you give me a head. Okay, thumbs up. Thank you. Okay, so the Developmental Disabilities Administration. A lot of you have probably heard DDA and you're probably wondering, what is DDA and what do they do? Why is everyone telling me that I need to apply for this service? So DDA is a service that provides funding for people with developmental disabilities. We partner with people with developmental disabilities and their families to provide leadership and resources to enable these individuals to live their most fulfilling lives. We are also guided by the principle that individuals with developmental disabilities have the right to direct their lives and services. I want you to pay attention to that last part because it will come up more in my presentation. So when you think of DDA, think of the money. We are going to pay for the service. We're not going to be the ones doing the day-to-day service with your loved ones. That is going to be done by different providers, and you will hear from a provider after I get done speaking. So when you think of DDA, think of me as paying for those services. So really quickly, let's touch on our application process. You can get our application online. You want to fill out our application. You cannot submit it online yet. I do apologize. We're working on that, but you can get that online. You want to include any supporting documentation you may have. The psychological that the school gives you a copy of, it is very important that you keep that and submit that with the application. Also, the IEP that the school does yearly, that's very important. And any other medical documentation that you may have to show that your loved one's needs that they may need, whether it's supervision or support services that they may need, may also be included with the application. Generally, we can tell whether they're going to meet our criteria based off the psychological and IEP, but you can include as much documentation as you like. What happens is once you submit that application, DDA is going to contract that out to do what we call a comprehensive assessment, a CA. That is an in-person interview. Why that is important is because, as we know, the same way somebody presents on paper may not be the same way they present in person. So at DDA, we want to take what's on paper and what's presented in person so that we can make our determination. The coordinator of community service has 45 business days to complete that process. Once they submit that to DDA, we are going to make a determination as to whether your loved one meets our criteria. So technically, from the time you fill out an application to the time you hear a response as to whether your loved one is eligible, it should take about 60 days. So this is why we want to get this done pretty much like as early as we can so that we can already have you on the waiting list and that we're not rushing at the last moment. So now you're probably wondering, what is our eligibility criteria? So a developmental disability is defined as a physical or mental impairment, but not just a mental illness, or it can be a combination of mental and physical impairments. So if you look down here in red, COMAR, it says COMAR 1022-12. COMAR are the state regulations for the state of Maryland. Every department has them, whether it's the Department of Transportation, Department of Corrections, everybody has their own COMAR section so that, you know, we're not just kind of making up these definitions. This is where we're pulling this stuff from, and this is the guidelines that we have to abide by. So if you even just Google COMAR 1022-12, it's going to bring up what the DDA definition is for a developmental disability. As you can see, as I stated, it's a physical or mental impairment, but not just mental illness. This means that someone who is strictly diagnosed with bipolar disorder would not qualify for our services. But if they have an intellectual disability and they're diagnosed with maybe ADHD or bipolar disorder, they could qualify for our services as long as the intellectual disability is the leading forefront for the disability. So we are looking for someone that has a condition that is more likely to continue forever. We have to show that it had an onset or started before the age of 22. That is where that psychological and that IEP come into play. It normally has your birthday on that so that we can see that it happened before the age of 22. Also, someone who needs the supports or assistance to live independently, and someone who would need the support of a team to help with services and treatment. So this is the eligibility criteria that our eligibility team looks at as defined in COMAR. There we go. So DDA, once you apply for services, let's say you are found eligible. DDA, you're on our waiting list, but we go based off priority categories. A lot of you have probably heard of the autism waiver, and you know that you can call and say, hey, where am I on the waiting list? The autism waiver could tell you, hey, you're 252, you're number 636, things of that nature. DDA operates a different way. We put people in priority categories. So if you call us, we couldn't give you a number because depending on what's going on with everyone else around the state, our waiting list is moving all the time at any given time. So I'm going to start at the bottom because it's just a little easier. Number 3 is current request. That means you need or want services, but health or safety are not immediate needs. 95% of the people on our waiting list are in the current request category. We also have crisis prevention, which is really a level 2. That means you are or will be in a health or safety crisis within the next year, or anyone who has a caregiver 65 or older automatically goes into the crisis prevention category. And then there's crisis resolution. That means you are currently in a crisis or an emergency situation. For example, someone who is being abused, who is abusing others in the home, someone who's being neglected, or someone who is homeless or on the verge of being homeless in 30 days. So that is how DDA funds categories. Right now, we only have funding for crisis resolution as far as the priority categories. So this can change depending on your situation and what's going on. So a lot of you are probably wondering, like, well, I'm not in crisis, so how do I get into services? We have a special pot of dedicated funds called the Governor's Transitioning Youth Initiative. This is for individuals who are aging out of high school, ready to go on into adult services. We were finding that the school systems work so hard with your loved ones to build these skills, to maintain these skills, to get them ready to go from school into adult services. But what we were finding were people were going home sitting on the waiting list, and those skills were diminishing because if you don't use them, you lose them. So this special pot of money is strictly for people who are coming out of school so that you do not lose those skills. We want to make sure we take everything that school has done with your loved one, and we want to kind of skip that waiting list, put them right into services so that we can keep working with your loved one to get those skills developed and keep and maintain those skills. So as I stated, it's eligible for funding after your school eligibility. They are specially dedicated. They're reauthorized each year by legislature. And it is very important to know that DDA is not an entitlement. Your loved one is entitled to so many things right now because they're in school and they have been diagnosed with a disability. Once you cross over into the adult services world, you have to show a demonstrated need for a service. All that means is we just do not give services because you want them. As long as you can show, hey, this is a demonstrated need and this is something that they need, we can provide that service. So you're not entitled to anything, but we do everything based off eligibility. So if you apply for DDA, let's say you have been found eligible for services, you are going to get a coordinator of community service. This is going to be your person that's going to help you navigate everything that I have said already and everything that I'm about to say later. So your CCS is going to assist with your loved ones' wants and needs post-school. They're going to coordinate and connect you to the different adult service providers. They'll help you identify potential providers. They'll help you complete paperwork for waiver enrollment. They're also going to develop a person-centered plan, a PCP for your loved one. A lot of you are used to the IEP. A PCP is sort of the same thing. It is done yearly, but it doesn't just focus on educational goals. The PCP is going to focus on everything that your loved one wants to do, anything that they want to do, and any kind of goals they may have. The CCS is going to monitor that implementation of the PCP and make sure that your loved one is satisfied with services. Because as I said, we want to make sure that your loved one remains at the center of that plan. The CCS will also coordinate the annual review of the PCP and update it. Excuse me. The CCS will advocate for your loved one and assist with your loved one advocating for themselves to ensure that he or she remain at the center of the plan during as we transition into adult services. Your CCS will also assist you with locating and implementing generic resources. We call generic resources things that are not DDA funded. Maybe you need assistance filling out like a Metro Access application, applying for Social Security, applying for Medicaid. Maybe you need camp funding, anything of that nature, or maybe just assistance with applying for DOORS, because DOORS is a separate program that's not DDA funded. Your CCS can help you kind of navigate the other resources in your community that you may not know about that aren't DDA funded. So I like to think of the CCS as DDA's eyes and ears. Like, I would love to talk to all the families, but we have thousands of people in services. So we contract with these CCS, and they're kind of the eyes and ears at making sure that you guys are satisfied with services, making sure that the provider is providing the services that DDA is paid for, and things of that nature. So I know all this is a lot of information, but just know if you apply to DDA and you're found eligible, you will have a CCS that's going to help you navigate this entire process. So in Prince George's County, these are the CCS agencies available. I normally get asked by families all the time, like, hey, which one should I go with? Who's the best? There's nothing that you're going to get from one agency that you can't get from another. It's really just your choice on who you want to work with. I think of them as maybe sometimes grocery stores. Some people like Harris Teeter's, you might like Wegmans, you might like Safeway. It really just depends on where you want to go. If you get a CCS and maybe things are not working out, you can switch that CCS agency. All you'd have to do is email us and let us know that you'd like a new one. So I don't want you to think you're locked in to anything. You can definitely switch the CCS if it's not working out. So really quickly, let's talk about, I've talked about how you apply. I've said that you're going to get a CCS. Now you're probably wondering, like, okay, well, what kind of services will my loved one be able to receive post high school going into adult services? So with DDA, we have meaningful day services. We've got day and employment services. We also have self-directed services, and we also have support services. Under our meaningful day services, there are 3 different options. We have day habilitation. So this is intended to increase independence, develop and maintain motor skills, communication skills, personal hygiene skills, and all those things related to lead to opportunities for integrated employment. We also have community development services, something that we call CDS. So this is to support and educate to help individuals whose age, disability, or circumstances currently limits their ability to be employed. So this program assists with developing skills and social supports necessary to gain, retain, or advance in employment. So this group goes out and normally no more than a group of 4. This could be volunteer opportunities. This could be them in the community, just trying to maintain and gain those skills in order to advance in employment. We also have career exploration, which is a time-limited service to help participants learn skills to work toward competitive integrated employment. So if you've been listening, you've probably heard me say employment for each one of those different services. Maryland is a employment first state. We are not saying that everyone has to work. We are saying that anyone who wants to should have the ability to. So what that means is sometimes people are thinking that they can't work because it's like, hey, they're going to have to be constantly reminded that they have to do X, Y, Z. Maybe they have to like, hey, you know, they might know this at one point, but you might have to come back around like, hey, remember we do it this way. That's fine. We're saying that whatever your loved one may need in order to complete a job, we can put that in, whether it's a job coach. They might have to have somebody that's with them that reminds them every hour. They might have to have somebody that's with them standing next to them. We want anyone who wants to work to have the ability to work, no matter what kind of supports we have to put in. So those are our meaningful day services and day. So you can intermix with these, which means that you can do, if they start on a day habilitation, they can go to community development service. So it's really just a choice. We don't like to put any, like, you know, one program out there so that it's cookie cutter. We definitely want people to have different options. So those are our day services. We also have meaningful day services, but they're employment. We have discovery, and this is a process to assist a participant in finding out who they are, what they want to do, and what they have to offer. We have so many people who come out of school and they're like, I know I want to work. I don't know what I'm good at. I don't know what I like to do. Discovery would help them, assist them with that, to say, hey, this is what you're good at. This is what we could do, and things of that nature. Then we have job development. We're going to take those great skills that your loved one is good at, and we're going to build a job like, hey, let's see what job may work with the great skills that you have. So that's going to be supports in finding a job, including customized employment and self-employment. Then we have ongoing supports. These are various supports a participant may need to successfully maintain their job. Like I said, you might have to have somebody that kind of checks in with you periodically through the day or maybe through the week to say, hey, let's make sure that we're, everything's going good and that everything's, it's a process and that you're doing okay, things of that nature. And then we have follow along supports. These are periodic supports after a participant has transitioned into their job. There are also some people that once you teach them, they're good. They're going to be set to go. And a follow along support may drop in weekly, may drop in monthly, may drop in quarterly. If somebody's on their job and they're doing great and they don't need those supports, it would just be a follow along support. So we have day services and we have employment services. And then DDA offers a host of support services. I like to look at these as add-ons to our day or employment services. These are other things that just might help enhance your loved one's time in the community or anything of that nature. I think probably the most used one in the support services is personal supports. If you look in the second column, third one down. Personal supports is a support person that can either meet your loved one at their day program or meet your loved one at home when the day program is over. And if they meet them at home, maybe they're going to work on organization in the house, helping your loved one in the house with certain things of that nature. Or if they meet them at their program, the personal support person can take your loved one into the community. Maybe your loved one wants to go to the movies. Maybe your loved one wants to get a haircut, get their nails done. Maybe they want to meet their friends into the community. DDA does not pay for the actual activities, but we will pay for the staff and the transportation to get your loved one there. And this is very good for families who are like, hey, a lot of these programs are ending at 3 p.m. I'm not getting off work until 5. After I fight traffic to get around the Beltway, I might not be home till 6:30. They can't be by themselves. That's where personal supports would come in. You have that person there to make sure that your loved one is either doing their things throughout the day, their activities, or make sure that your loved one is doing other habilitative goals. So DDA also offers like environmental modifications. As long as you own your home, there are sometimes you may need grab bars put in the shower. You may need ramps put on. We also do vehicle modifications for like different lifts and things of that nature. So like I said, these are all support services that could be added on to just help enhance your loved one's habilitative goals. And another program that we have that is growing exponentially is self-directed services. There are times I meet with families and they're like, okay, Nicole, the traditional side, they're pretty much going to these programs from 9 in the morning to like 3 p.m. If you wake them up before 11, before 12, it is not going to be a good day. The self-directed service model is an alternative to the traditionally delivered services. You could actually build your own day around you where your loved one would. You would be the employer of record. So that means that you are going to hire your own staff, train your staff. If things don't go right, you're going to have to fire your own staff. But this is a very good program that is growing because people are building their days around them. DDA will provide you with a budget that's housed at a fiscal management agency. And what happens is once you hire your staff is going to submit the timesheets, and then they'll get paid directly from the budget that DDA has set aside for your loved one. So this is a program that, like I said, is growing because it allows people to have their choice of when, their day program starts, when it might end, what they want to do, and things of that nature. So that's also if none of our traditional providers and work for you, self-directed services is an option as well. Because like I said, we don't want cookie cutter services. We want to meet everyone where they are. So really quickly, this is an approximate timeline of your loved one's transition year. So I'm going to use the people that are graduating in, June of 2024. The summer before their transition year. So this would have been between June and October of 2023, because if you're graduating 2024, this is the summer before you come out. We are asking families to visit providers. So families had already been on the ground visiting providers, doing things of that nature. Generally in the fall, October to December, which is where we are now, we ask that families turn a choice letter or to just turn their choices into their CCS. We ask that you visit at least 1 to 4 providers because just because you pick a provider, that provider has to pick you as well. And we just want to make sure that, you visited enough. So the CCS will follow up with the provider to see if you were accepted into the program. And then generally in late winter, early spring, that's only between February and May, the CCS is gathering documentation to complete the waiver, and those initial PCPs are being completed. We're doing those person-centered plans to see your loved one's goals, things of that nature, working with the provider that has accepted you and things of that. Then in mid-May, your CCS is going to come out and the waivers are signed and submitted. These are Medicaid-based services, so everybody's going to go on a waiver so that Medicaid can pay for these services. And then the earliest your loved one will start services will be July 1st after their graduation date. So this is an approximate timeline of what a transitions you last year should look like. So we're not going to ask questions yet. We're going to go ahead and get to the other presentation, but I just wanted everybody really quickly to take note of my email, because even though we're going to answer questions, if you are not sure if you've applied for DDA, email me. If you know you've applied, but you don't know what we said or where you are in the process, email me. If you're like, I know I applied, I used to have a CCS, I kind of lost contact, email me. I can update you and get you any of that information. If you know you haven't applied and you're like, hey, can you just send me an application? Email me and I can definitely get that out to you. So thank you. I'm going to let the next presenter go, but I will still be here so that I can answer any in-depth questions that you have on the DDA process afterwards.
Thank you, Nicole. We did get some questions popped up. If we want to take a second here, I think you're able to share your screen, so we'll let you go ahead.
Can everybody see my screen? Okay, thank you for the thumbs up. Thank you, Nicole. What a great job. I'm really tired after that exhaustive thing of everything relative to DDA and all the services and the transitional process. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what happens once the CCS has been identified and once the PCP or draft person-centered plan is identified. So what typically happens is a family member or their person or the CCS will reach out to the provider and they'll schedule a time or request to say, are you accepting admissions? And so depending on that provider's perspective and what they're doing, they'll get a response back on saying whether or not they have open submissions, whether or not they have a waiting list or of that nature. And then if the provider has openings or accepting admissions, then the CCS connects the families with the provider, and the provider starts to look at scheduling a time to sit down with the family. So each provider has a different process. So some providers will they'll do a meeting just to meet and greet the family members and the person, just to talk about, not get into a lot of detail what services they do, just more about just to interview each other, get to know each other, try to get a perspective of what people are looking for, and that person and the families get an idea of what that agency's like and what they do and how they perform services. Some families want to visit sites. Some families might, if they're looking at a day program, if there's a day program at that agency, they might visit that day program. They might want to have a conversation about how they do employment services or the different employers that they may be working with at the time and how they do their employment program, and also potentially look at how they do one of the other services Nicole mentioned was community development services. So there's some families that do it that way. Some providers go through that process. Some providers don't do an initial meeting at the beginning. They do, they ask for a certain type of paperwork, and that paperwork could include a person-centered plan, an individual education plan, IEP, behavioral plan, if applicable, some medication or medical summary documentations, those types of things. So each provider will have a different process. So but in generally, there's like 3 or 4 steps that each provider will be doing. And obviously one of them is scheduling a time with the person and the family. So as I talked about, then typically what happens during what I would call the informational sharing time, that's when there's going to be more in-depth conversation with the provider and the person and the family about what kind of services they're seeking. As Nicole mentioned, it could be community development services, it could be employment services. Sometimes it's personal support, respite services, community living group home support. I mean, so the services are quite expansive. So there could be, again, a more in-depth conversation about what the family is seeking. If it's community living group home, supported living, and those types of services, it's going to be what county they want to live in, you know, what area of the county, those types of things. So there's going to be more and more conversation, questions and answer. And again, there could be more opportunities to visit and spend time with different models of services. At this time, you would be meeting potentially directors and coordinators, people that you would have more of day-to-day interactions if if you ended up choosing that service as or that provider for the services. So you start to get to meet with the people that you're going to be having interactions with if you end up choosing that provider and that provider chooses you. So, and it's not, and this is not a very quick, you know, somebody might ask, well, how long does it take? You know, so typically, you know, through the application process and the information sessions and the informational sharing, it's going to be a week to probably a month before a decision is going to be made based upon, you know, the timing of when people can schedule times to see each other and have those conversations. So again, there's going to be the application, there's going to be the conversation that each person in the family have with the provider. There's going to be the sharing of what services that they want or they're looking for. And then through that process and decision making, the family's going to make a decision. So the person in the family are going to make a decision whether or not they want that provider to be their service provider, and and then the provider themselves is going to make a decision on whether or not they have the capacity and have the ability to support the person in the request that they need. So it sounds very simple, but it is something that takes a few weeks for that decision to be made. So if the person chooses the provider and the provider chooses the person, then the next step is really what's called a service implementation plan, you know, and we call it a SIP, but it's a service implementation plan. That plan is taking all the information that was gathered during the informational sharing process, during the conversations that people have had, some of the Q&A that have occurred during that firstly, I guess the intake process. It's looking at the person-centered plan, and then from that, what the provider does is create what's called again the SIP, and that's going to have their outcomes, their goals, you know, that are the services. You know, what are the services I'm going to provide? What are those service goals? What are those service objectives? You know, how am I going to do those services? And what is the funding? You know, what is the funding associated with that service, and what is the payment or the unit? So some services are paid by units, some services are paid by day. So it's really looking at here's what I want to achieve. This is the service that best meets what I'm trying to achieve, and here's the amount of service hours I need to be able to do that. And that becomes, you know, what we submit back to the family to review, to make sure that we gathered everything that the family was looking for. We're aligning the goals and services to the person-centered plan, and also, you know, aligning to what that person wants to achieve. Well, you know, what are the dreams that they want to have? What's the vision they have for the, you know, for the adult life relative to the goals and different living situation, employment goals, those types of things. So once that is developed and finalized by the family and the provider, then that document is the SIP is submitted to the CCS. Some agencies do. This is a form that we did before, which was a DSAT. It's a detailed service authorization form. That is not necessarily all providers are not doing that. Some providers continue to do this. At Compass, we continue to do this. So we submit the SIP along with the DSAT, and this is the documents that are submitted. This is where the next part of the process is. It goes into a system called LTSS, long-term support services. And that's the funding system that's associated with people that are receiving DDA services. So there is an approval process that that we go through, and there's the CCS is involved, DDA and Nicole and their agencies involved, where the plan gets approved. So once that it goes through that process, that approval process, the plan gets approved, and then we would circle back, the provider would circle back to sit down with the family and start the what I would call the onboarding process. So the plan's approved. So now let's look at recruitment of support staff, the hiring, the training, the orientation of the support staff, the different trainings that they receive that are not just the core trainings that they have to receive from the from Developmental Disabilities Administration, what the provider requires, but any other trainings that might be person specifics, so that the implementation of the services are as seamless as possible and as successful as possible. So the hiring recruitment of staff is, people may ask and should ask, how long does that take? And that varies from provider to provider and service by service. Many of us don't have staff in waiting to provide that services. So depending on what service is being requested and the implementation of the service may change, the timing of when those services are being implemented. So for example, community development services, it has dedicated services, but it also has what's called group services. So there may be openings in group services in a provider, and a person may be able to, if it fits their person-centeredness and what they want to achieve, it may be easier for the staffing, the implementation of those services to begin versus the implementation of dedicated supports of some type for CDS services. Employment services, typically may start earlier, more so because if a person has what's called discovery services, which is you're really starting the job development process, really trying to figure out what that person is seeking. There's a community-based discovery process. There's more in-depth person discovery process about their vision, what they want to work, what's available in the community, what can be developed in the community. So many agencies already have people that are trained to do that service, discovery services and job development. So those services could begin a lot sooner than some other services, again, based upon the staffing of that service and depending on what the service is itself. So, part of the onboarding promise is more about the agency. It's more about, a deeper relationship development with the family and the person, to get to know the person better at a deeper level. Same with the families, and to really start the cultural building and the relationships and moving towards a partnership. Because similar to the relationships that families have with the school, it's a partnership. So the more robust and deeper of the partnership between your son or daughter with the school, the more successful, more likely they're successful in the school venture. The same thing, the same relationship building needs to occur with the provider. Is the deeper relationship you have with the provider, the more likely the person's going to achieve their dreams, the more successful they're going to achieve their dreams. So Compass, here at Compass and many providers, we look at it, it's really an extension of the partnership. It's just moving the partnership from the school, from the parents, into the obviously the person and the provider and the family member relative to that partnership. So I think I forgot to introduce myself. So my name is Rick Callahan, and I am the executive director of Compass. And so I went through that very quickly. I've been in this field for a very, very long time. So to me, the thing about the mostly remember is that it's the introduction and meeting the different providers. And once you make a decision, we're here to support your son and daughter's dreams and what they're seeking. We're here to support that and figure it out. So to me, we'll figure out the funding and the services. What we really need from the person and the family is, okay, what do I want to have? What are my dreams? What are things I want to see happen in my life? A job, living in their own place, being connected to community partnerships, and then we can figure out what funding stream matches that. So to me, what's the most important thing that needs to occur is that there's sharing of that information of what that person is seeking. And it's, to me, when we're looking at, and I'll use employment as an example. One example is, a person might say, what kind of job you want, and they might say, they might only mention the jobs they ever do. And our approach and many providers' approach is really look as, what are the things you like to do? What are the things you really like to do? And is there a way to make money from doing things you like to do? And to me, that opens up all kinds of opportunities. So again, what we're here to do is support what the family and the person, or the person and the family, are seeking. What are their streams? What are those things that they want to achieve in their life goals? So that's my portion. I am open for any questions along with Nicole, but that's a very short version of what typically happens when the person starts to seek adult services.